A little while ago, we introduced our new Mulligan Bomber. That is our new 5-inch paddle tail. And in this video, I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite retrieves so you can be more effective whenever you're using this lure. We're going to go right from a very beginner retrieve to a more of an intermediate. And the last one's going to be a retrieve you might not think about, but it really works well in certain situations. Now, this first retrieve is very, very basic. This is where I want everybody to start. Matter of fact, people that are brand new to fishing or people that are brand new to artificial, I always recommend starting out with a paddle tail because they're the easiest ones to work because you don't have to do anything special. And all I'm going to do, just cast it out there, let it sink down, and then all I'm going to do is just do a straight reel. And what I'm going to do is make sure that that lure is contacting the bottom. That's going to be where most of your strikes come from, is when that lure is right on the bottom. But I'm just going to do a slow and steady retrieve. And this is really simple. Make sure you don't go too fast and you're going to get that paddle tail, that lure, too far up in the water column. You want to keep it right down towards the bottom, especially in shallow water. So if you're fishing 3 feet or less, you definitely want to make sure and bump the bottom. And that's where a lot of your strikes are going to come from. And this one's really basic. And one thing about this retrieve is I have caught a lot of fish doing this. Matter of fact, this is pretty much my go-to when I'm out there fishing the shallow flats and just working an area, is I will do a straight retrieve a lot of times. And it's just, as I said, this is the basic one I want everybody to start out with. Now let's talk about the second retrieve. I'll go ahead and cast this on out there. And this is more of an intermediate one. If you've been fishing for a while, this is going to suit you really well. And something to think about whenever fish are feeding, they're looking for a darting activity. So anytime that an injured bait fish is around, usually it's kind of darting around, it's swimming erratically, and that darting action will make your lure stand out from any bait that's out there. Because a lot of times, bait fish that are in good shape, they're just going to swim along, in a certain direction. They're not going to go crazy. But if they're injured, then they start darting around, and that's what we want to imitate with a second retrieve. So what we're going to do in this retrieve is we are just going to do some sharp raises of the rod tip, just like that. So we're going to raise it up, and then we're going to let that lure settle back down to the bottom. We're going to reel in that slack, snap it up again, let that lure settle down to the bottom, reel in that slack, and then pop it up again. So again, what we're going to do is just snap it up, and then we're going to let it come back down to the bottom. We're going to reel in that slack, and then we're going to do it again. Now, whenever it comes to the speed of the retrieve or the speed of the snaps and that's all going to vary too. It's going to be completely different depending on the mood of the fish. So sometimes you're going to have to do something, a really aggressive snap like that, and then reel down fast and get those fish's attention. Sometimes it's a real slow raise and then let us sink slowly, and then it's a slow reel in the slack, and then you can start over that way. But then other times it's going to be a really aggressive one. So again, we're going to mix that up depending on the mood of the fish, and keep changing it up until you find out what they want. Now, this last retrieve, a lot of people don't think about this one when using a paddle tail, but if you're dealing with an area that's got a lot of floating grass, or the grass is almost topped out on the surface and you really can't get any other lures through there, and you're still seeing fish in the area, they're feeding on the surface or they're milling around in the grass, this is a great retrieve for that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and throw my lure out, and then as soon as it hits the water, I'm going to start buzzing it across the surface. Much like you would a buzz bait for bass fishing, this is an excellent retrieve, kind of, like those standard bass lures that you see, the whopper plopper or any of those. And what this does is it allows you to get your lure out there where those fish are and fish those areas with that floating grass or that topped out grass, but you don't have to worry about getting hung up in it. And for whatever reason, redfish really like this retrieve, but I have caught trout and I've caught snook doing this too. So it's very effective, especially when you're seeing fish feeding in an area that has got a lot of topped out or a lot of floating grass in there, and there's nothing else that you can do. Now, one thing I want to say is whenever you are casting this out there, make sure to have your hand on the reel and close that bail as soon as that lure gets close to the water. That way you can start retrieving it as soon as that lure hits the water, because if you're dealing with a lot of floating grass or a lot of topped out grass, if you let that lure sink, then it's going to get clogged up with weeds. So make sure to have your hand at the ready on the bail of that reel and close it and start reeling in as soon as it hits the water, or even slightly before it hits the water. That's a great one. Now let's talk about rigging for a second. When it comes to the first 2 retrieves, either one of our most popular rigging methods will work great for that. I always recommend going with an exposed hook jig head like the round eye jig head, if at all possible. But a lot of times we get hung up on a lot of weeds and a lot of structure that we're fishing near, and that's when you'll want to go with a Haas Helix, which is our weedless setup. Now that will work for the first 2 retrieves. For that last retrieve where you're buzzing the lure across the surface, I recommend going with a Haas Helix, which is the weedless setup, in the lightest weight possible. either the 1/16 ounce or even take that weight off, and that will help you keep that lure up at the surface of the water with less effort. You won't have to reel it in as fast to keep it up there. And if you're interested in trying the Mulligan Bomber, we do have these available at fishstrong.com. These are the perfect solution if you're looking for those trophy fish, or if you're just fishing in an area that has a lot of large bait. And remember, our members do get huge discounts off a tackle at fishstrong.com. So that's going to be the video. I hope you like it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it. If you've got any questions or comments, go ahead and put those down below, and I'll try to answer them as soon as I can. As always, I really do appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.